could you marry your cousin? What about someone from a completely different faith, or maybe even someone your family really, really disapproves of?
Hmm.
These aren't just, abstract questions. For a lot of people, they're very real, very personal situations.
Absolutely.
So today, we're diving deep into the akaminika. That's the uh, intricate set of rules around Islamic marriage.
Right.
And our goal here is really to pull out the practical insights, maybe some surprising facts, from this great collection of questions and answers put together by the Quran Outrat Academy.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource.
Think of it as a way to understand these often complex scenarios better and shed light on the principles guiding millions.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how these answers give clarity on just about everything, from, the basic definition of marriage itself right through to really sensitive family dynamics.
Now, these aren't theoretic.
No, not at all. These are direct compilations of real-life questions people submitted. They needed guidance. And the answers are from leading religious authorities, mujtahids like Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khomeini.
So it's a real window into how the law is applied day to day.
Exactly. It shows the practical application.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning then. Islamic marriage. It isn't just one single thing, is it? There seem to be different forms.
That's right. Primarily, Islamic law recognizes two main forms. You have nikah, which is a permanent marriage, the one most people think of.
Right.
And then there's muta, which is often called temporary marriage.
Mutta. Okay, tell us more about that.
Well, muta is a distinct type of marriage contract. It's recognized in the Quran and Hadith. And its key feature, based on these sources, is a specific agreed-upon duration.
Duration, like how long?
It could be anything, really. An hour, a day, a month, a year, maybe longer, whatever the couple agrees on. And for that set period, it makes the man and woman lawful to each other, just like nikah.
Interesting. So whether it's permanent nikah or this temporary mutha, what are the absolute must-haves? What needs to happen for it to be valid?
Okay, so for both types, consent is absolutely number one. Both the man and the woman have to be fully willing. No coercion. They have to be acting freely.
Makes sense. What else?
Beyond consent, the formula, or siya, is essential. This involves reciting specific phrases.
The verbal contract.
Exactly. Now, Arabic is preferred, but if that's not possible, reciting it in another language is generally acceptable as long as the meaning and the intention are totally clear.
So it's not just a nod and a wink. There are actual words involved. What kind of phrases?
Right. For a permanent marriage, nikah, the woman would typically say something along the lines of, I have made myself your wife with the specified dowry.
Okay.
And crucially, the man has to respond immediately, saying something like, I accepted the marriage, or even just, I accepted.
Immediately.
Yes, that immediacy is important. For mutha, the temporary marriage, the phrasing is similar, but it has to explicitly mention the time period.
Right.
So the woman would say something like, I marry myself to you for the known period with the known dowry. And again, the man responds immediately, I accept it.
It sounds like the intent behind the words right at that moment is just as important as the words themselves.
Precisely. The person reciting the formula, they have to be of sound mind. And very importantly, if they're reciting it for themselves, they need to be balai.
Balai.
Meaning they've reached religious maturity, which is typically around puberty. This ensures their consent is genuinely informed and deliberate. Oh, and for muta, one more thing. The dowry, the mahr, that must be agreed upon beforehand. It's part of the temporary contract.
Okay, got it. Now, here's something that I think will genuinely surprise a lot of listeners, because it definitely goes against what many people assume. Witnesses. I always thought witnesses were absolutely essential for any marriage. But looking through these Q&As, it seems for nikah, witnesses are actually not required for it to be valid. Is that right?
That is correct. And it's a really fascinating distinction in Islamic law, isn't it?
It really is. Why is that?
Well, it tells us something profound. The core validity of the nikah, according to this perspective, isn't about public spectacle or, societal approval through witnesses. It's fundamentally about the direct, explicit covenant made between the man, the woman, and God.
Through their consent in this ayah.
Exactly. Through their willing consent and the precise recitation of that formula. It really puts the emphasis on the internal spiritual commitment rather than external validation.
And that idea of the direct agreement.
Mm-hmm.
It even stretches into our modern tech world, right?
It does. The sources confirm it's perfectly okay to perform the nikah over the phone, for instance.
Really?
Yeah, as long as all those other conditions we just talked about, consent, siya, intention, are properly met. It shows how these traditional rulings can adapt.
Okay, so we've laid out the foundation's consent, the formula, dowry for muta, no witnesses needed for nikah. But marriage obviously isn't just about two individuals in isolation.
No, definitely not.
It's tangled up with family, with community. So let's explore that. How do these rulings guide people through those sometimes tricky social aspects, especially around family approval and maybe marrying outside your immediate group?
Right, that's a huge part of it. The sources give quite clear guidelines, especially when it comes to parental consent for virgin girls.
Okay, what's the general rule there?
The general rule is that a virgin girl needs the permission of her father, or, if he's not there, her paternal grandfather to marry.
Even if she's an adult and financially independent?
Yes, even if she's mature and self-sufficient, it's seen as an important protective measure in Islamic law, ensuring there's some wise guidance involved in such a major life decision.
But life isn't always straightforward. Are there exceptions? Situations where she wouldn't need that permission?
Yes, definitely. There are specific exceptions laid out. For instance, the requirement is lifted if her father or paternal grandfather are no longer alive. That's obvious. Also, crucially, if they refuse permission for a man who is considered religiously and socially equal to her kufu, is the term, meaning he's a genuinely suitable match by Islamic standards, and their refusal is unreasonable.
Unreasonable refusal.
Yes, if they're just obstructing a good match without valid grounds, then her permission might not be needed according to some rulings. It prevents, unfair blocking of a suitable marriage.
Any other cases?
Another exception is if getting their permission is just practically impossible, say. They're absent, unreachable, or there are other compelling reasons, and the marriage is considered essential for the girl, perhaps to protect her faith or well-being.
Okay.
And lastly, if the girl is not a virgin anymore, maybe she was previously married and divorced, or widowed, after having intercourse within that valid marriage, she typically doesn't need this specific permission anymore.
Right, but just to be super clear on that point, if she lost her virginity through, say, fornication, zina, does that remove the need for her father's permission?
No. The sources are very explicit about this. Losing virginity through zina does not remove the requirement for a virgin girl to get her father or paternal grandfather's consent.
Interesting. That really underscores the emphasis on marital legitimacy.
It does.
Okay, one more on this. What if a father objects, but maybe his reasons seem wrong? Like he says the suitor drinks alcohol, but it's a false accusation. The guy actually doesn't. Does she still need permission then?
Even in that kind of difficult situation where the father might be rejecting a suitable person based on misinformation or false pretenses, the ruling often suggests she may still need permission. The general rule holds quite strong unless it clearly falls into those specific exceptions, like the suitor being demonstrably equal and the father's refusal lacking any valid religious or social basis recognized in the law.
Wow, that's strict.
It can be, but interestingly, look at the flip side for the man. A boy or a man can marry a girl even if his own parents are completely against it. Even if, as one source mentions, his mother threatens something drastic like, denying him her mother's milk and disapproval, his consent is generally sufficient for his marriage.
That is quite a contrast, isn't it? Different approaches to parental consent there.
Very much so.
So this idea of suitability or kufu seems important. Does it extend beyond just the immediate family? What about marrying across different Islamic sects or maybe different social groups or backgrounds?
Yes, that's another crucial area the sources address. For instance, marriage between Shia and Sunni Muslims.
Right, that comes up a lot.
It's generally considered permissible for, say, a Shia woman to marry a Muslim man from another denomination, provided there isn't a significant risk that the marriage will lead her away from her own faith or practice.
So the key is her ability to maintain her own religious identity.
Exactly, but there's often a strong recommendation against it if there's what they call a fear of going astray or gumrahi. If there's a real concern that the union might weaken her religious conviction or observance, then it's discouraged. It really highlights how central individual faith is within the marriage.
Okay. And what about marrying between Sayyids and non-Sayyids? That can be a point of social sensitivity in some communities.
Yes, and the sources are very clear on this. They explicitly state that marriage between Sayyid and non-Sayyid individuals is permissible in Shia Islam.
So no religious barrier there.
Absolutely not. It directly tackles and dismisses any societal notions that might suggest otherwise. It strongly reinforces the broader Islamic principle that a Muslim man is considered equal, or kufu, to a Muslim woman, and a believing man to a believing woman, fundamentally based on faith and character, not lineage or family background.
So things like family name, caste, tribe, Pathan, Urdu speaking, whatever.
Yeah.
None of that creates a fundamental barrier.
Correct. The emphasis, according to these rulings, is truly on shared faith and good character as the basis for equality in marriage.
All right. And stepping outside Islam entirely. How do the rules work for marrying non-Muslims? For Muslim men first.
Okay, for a Muslim man marrying, say, a Christian or a Jewish woman who are considered al-kitab, people of the book, temporary marriage, muta, is generally permissible.
Okay.
However, for a permanent lifelong nikah, it's generally advised against as a recommended precaution, ihtiyat mustahab. So, not strictly forbidden in all interpretations, but strongly discouraged.
And what about a Hindu woman, for example?
With a polytheist, like a Hindu woman, marriage is generally not permissible unless she converts to Islam first.
Right. And for Muslim women, can they marry non-Muslim men?
For a Muslim woman, the ruling is much clearer and stricter across the board. It is not permissible for her to marry a non-Muslim man.
At all. Not even temporary.
No, whether temporary or permanent, even if the man is from the people of the book, like a Christian or a Jew, that marriage is considered invalid.
Okay, that's very clear. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground on consent and who you can marry. Let's shift now to some maybe more complex relationship scenarios and definite prohibitions. One question that inevitably comes up is about relationships that start before marriage, specifically involving fornication or zina.
Right. Well, first off, it's crucial to state that zina is considered a very grave sin in Islam. It has serious spiritual consequences.
Understood. But what if two people commit zina and then want to get married? Is that allowed?
Yes, it is permissible, according to these sources, to marry the person with whom one committed zina.
Okay.
However, there's a strong recommendation, again, as a sort of recommended precaution, for both individuals to sincerely repent before the marriage takes place. It underscores the need for spiritual cleansing and turning back to God after the transgression.
Okay, repentance is key there. Now, what about marrying relatives? There are obviously some very clear lines drawn, right?
Absolutely. The prohibitions regarding close relatives, known as mahram, are very explicit. You absolutely cannot marry your direct lineage, your mother, daughter, sister. Also prohibited are your brother's daughter, niece, your sister's daughter, niece, your father's sister, paternal aunt, and your mother's sister, maternal aunt.
That seems fairly standard across many cultures.
Yeah.
What about fosterage, milk kinship?
Yes, fosterage creates prohibitions just like blood relationships, but under very specific conditions. If a woman nurses an infant child, not her own, a certain number of full feedings before the child reaches a certain age, usually around 2 years old.
Specific conditions.
Very specific. It's not just a casual one-off thing or done jokingly. If those conditions are met, that child then becomes mahram to the woman's own children, meaning they cannot marry each other later in life. It creates a bond like siblingship.
Okay, that's important to know. It's quite specific. What about in-laws? Are there prohibitions there too?
Yes, definitely. You cannot marry your mother-in-law or your grandmother-in-law. And similarly, you cannot marry your daughter-in-law or your granddaughter-in-law. These become permanent prohibitions once the marriage contract with their relative, your spouse or your child's spouse, is validly established.
Okay. Now, this next one seems really specific and highlights the kind of detailed questions people ask. What about marrying the daughter of a woman one committed zina with?
Yes. This is where you really see the nuance in the rulings, often aiming for, the highest level of spiritual purity and avoiding even potential moral gray areas.
Complex.
It is. There are actually differing views presented in the sources we looked at. One fatwa, or ruling, states that it is permissible technically because the daughter isn't one of the explicitly listed prohibited relatives based on blood or marriage.
Okay, so technically allowed by one view.
Right. However, other significant rulings don't forbid it outright, but strongly advise against it. They classify it as mustahab or ula, meaning it's a recommended precaution or better to avoid it. While maybe not strictly haram, forbidden, it's considered spiritually preferable not to enter that marriage. The idea is to maintain a higher degree of caution and avoid relationships potentially clouded by a past major sin. This is especially true if the zina was committed with someone already closely related, like your paternal or maternal aunt in that specific case. Marrying their daughters does become permanently prohibited according to some rulings.
Wow. So even if technically permissible by one standard, the strong advice might be to steer clear for spiritual reasons.
Exactly. It shows a deep concern for avoiding even the shadow of moral ambiguity.
Okay. What about marrying your wife's sister? or her niece.
Right. While you are currently married to your wife, while that nikah is active, you absolutely cannot marry her sister. That's a definite prohibition. You can't be married to two sisters simultaneously.
Got it. And her niece, like her brother's daughter.
You cannot marry your wife's niece, either brother's or sister's daughter, without your current wife's explicit permission. If she agrees, it's permissible. If she doesn't, it's not.
Her permission is needed there. Okay. What about, say, your maternal uncle's wife, your mummy? If they divorce or he passes away?
That is permissible. You can marry her, but only after your maternal uncle has formally divorced her and her idat, her waiting period after divorce, is fully completed. Or if he passes away after his death and her subsequent waiting period is over.
Okay. And similarly, your brother's widow.
Yes, same principle. Marrying your brother's widow is permissible, but only after her waiting period following your brother's death has concluded.
Right. And just to nail this down, can a woman ever be in two marriages at the same time? Say, if her first husband disappears or something.
No, absolutely not. That's explicitly prohibited. A woman cannot be party to two valid marriage contracts simultaneously under any circumstances. Her first marriage must be definitively ended through death or a valid divorce before she can remarry.
Crystal clear. Okay, let's talk about multiple wives for men. Polygyny. This is obviously a topic that generates a lot of discussion and sometimes controversy. What do the sources actually say?
According to the rulings presented in these sources, yes, it is permissible for a man to have more than one wife. This can include up to 4 permanent wives simultaneously and potentially temporary mutha wives as well. Some sources even state it's recommended, mutahab.
Recommended.
Yes, in some contexts or interpretations. And crucially, the general rule is that the first wife's permission is not required for him to take another wife.
Not required.
Not usually, unless she specifically stipulated that as a condition within their original marriage contract. If she made it a condition beforehand and he agreed, then he would need her permission. Otherwise, generally, no.
Okay, that's an important distinction about the contract condition.
Yeah.
Now, what about marital problems? If a couple's having serious issues, maybe they stop speaking or they stop being intimate, does that automatically end the marriage?
No, it doesn't. Things like not speaking to each other or even abstaining from intercourse for a period, however long, do not in themselves invalidate the marriage contract.
So the marriage is still valid?
Yes. The nikah remains legally and religiously valid until a formal, Islamically recognized divorce, talaq, is issued and finalized. Emotional distance or lack of intimacy doesn't automatically dissolve the bond.
Right, it requires a specific act of divorce. Okay, and one final, somewhat sensitive topic in this section. Child marriage. Specifically regarding minor girls, what's the ruling there?
The sources state that a father or a paternal grandfather does have the authority to arrange a marriage for a minor girl, meaning someone below the age of puberty or legal majority.
They can arrange the marriage.
Yes, the contract can be made. However, there's a very important protective ruling alongside that. Intercourse with a minor girl is strictly forbidden, haram, before she reaches the age of 9 lunar years.
Forbidden before 9. Okay, that's a crucial protective measure.
Absolutely.
All right. We've navigated some really complex legal territory. To kind of bring things towards a practical conclusion for our listeners, let's talk about general guidance and social considerations. Beyond just the rules, what advice do these sources offer for choosing a spouse, managing relationships, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. A really strong theme coming through is the immense importance placed on choosing a spouse based on their religious commitment and character.
Religion and character.
Yes. The advice is consistently to look for someone who is religious, who is chaste, and who possesses good moral character, akhlaq. For example, regarding a potential husband, if a man consistently neglects his obligatory prayers, salat, marrying him is generally not recommended, especially if there's a genuine fear that his lack of practice might negatively influence the other spouse and lead them astray from their own faith.
So compatibility in faith and practice is highly valued.
Very much so.
What about friendships? Particularly close friendships between men and women who aren't married or related.
The sources generally indicate that close, non-essential friendships, especially those that might lead towards romantic feelings or deep emotional attachment between unrelated men and women, are generally not permissible.
Not permissible. Why?
The reasoning given is primarily the fear of falling into sin. The concern is that such closeness, without the boundaries of marriage or family ties, creates a strong potential for actions or feelings that violate Islamic moral guidelines, potentially leading to illicit thoughts, actions, or even zina. The aim is preventative, to safeguard morality.
I see. So it's about avoiding situations that could lead to temptation or transgression.
That's the underlying principle, yeah.
Okay. How about within the marriage itself? What about a wife's obligations and rights, specifically regarding things like leaving the house?
Right. A wife generally needs her husband's permission to leave the house, but the sources often qualify this. It usually applies if her leaving conflicts with his established rights as a husband, for example, his right to intimacy or her presence being needed for family well-being, or if her going out involves something Islamically impermissible. It's not usually seen as an absolute restriction on any movement, but tied to marital rights and responsibilities.
So if she wanted to attend, say, a religious gathering like a no recitation.
She would typically need his permission if her absence impacts his rights, yes. Communication and mutual understanding are key there.
And what about intimacy? After the nikah is done, but maybe before the couple has formally moved in together, the rukhsati.
Okay, so once the nikah contract is validly completed, the husband and wife are technically halal permissible to each other for all forms of intimacy. The marriage is established, but there's a consideration for cultural norms and mutual agreement. If the established custom in their community is that intercourse doesn't happen until after the rukhsati, the formal event signifying the bride moving to the husband's home and the public start of their life together, then the wife is generally not obligated to consent to intercourse before that time, even though the nikah is technically valid.
So cultural practice plays a role in the timing of consummation.
Yes, custom and mutual understanding are often respected in that initial phase.
Interesting. Okay, what about adopted children? In terms of marriage later in life, whose names are used for lineage, the biological or adoptive parents.
For all legal Islamic purposes, including establishing lineage for marriage prohibitions, mahram, and inheritance, the biological parents' names and lineage must be retained and used. Adoptive parents are highly rewarded for their care, but they don't replace the biological lineage in these specific legal contexts.
So the biological ties remain paramount legally.
Correct.
And finally, any specific advice from these sources for people who are single and looking to get married, or for parents involved in that process, maybe even spiritual support?
Yes, definitely. There's an emphasis that if a person genuinely fears they might fall into sin, like zina, if they remain unmarried, then getting married actually becomes obligatory, wajib, for them.
Obligatory to protect oneself.
Exactly. And parents are strongly encouraged, even urged, to facilitate marriage for their children and to accept proposals from suitors who demonstrate good religious commitment and character rather than focusing solely on wealth or status.
Facilitating marriage is encouraged.
Very much so. And beyond the practical advice, the sources do mention various spiritual practices or supplications that people use when seeking help in finding a spouse or resolving marital difficulties. Things like reciting specific chapters of the Quran, like Surah Yasin or Surah Taha, or particular prayers like Dua Tawassul, or invoking God's names like Ya Latif, O gentle, or Ya Wadud, O loving.
So both practical steps and spiritual resources are suggested.
Yes, a holistic approach.
Well, as you can definitely hear, these rulings cover an incredible amount of detail. They really try to provide clear guidance for just countless individual situations people face.
They do, offering pathways that aim to balance these core religious principles with the, real complexities of practical life.
Yeah, and I think this whole deep dive really shows that these Islamic marriage laws are maybe far more nuanced, more detailed, and perhaps more adaptive in some ways than they're often perceived from the outside.
That's a great point. There is a strong emphasis on individual consent, on careful family guidance, and underpinning it all, spiritual well-being, all within this carefully structured framework.
It really does raise an important question for reflection, doesn't it? How do these incredibly detailed answers, addressing almost every conceivable scenario, actually work in practice to help foster not just, legally correct unions, but genuinely thriving, pious relationships that can last and flourish in our incredibly complex modern world?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? How does the law translate into lived reality and thriving families? Something definitely worth thinking about.